Boom. Hey, everybody. This is Teddy Burriss, your LinkedIn strategist, trainer, and coach. I work for that company over there. I work for my wife, and we're LinkedIn strategists, trainers. We help people use LinkedIn as a business tool. And me and my good friend, Mr. Randy Wooden, wave to everybody, Randy.
Everybody.
Randy and I decided to put together the show, and we have a blast every Wednesday at noon, bringing great, fabulous special guests to the conversation. And you're in for a freaking treat. Let me just tell you right now. She brings her own fan club with her out of Naples, Florida, up into North Carolina. So hang on, we'll introduce her to you soon. Hey, Randy, would you introduce yourself to our friends?
Sure thing. Yeah, it's Randy Wooden. I work with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, right here in Winston-Salem, where it's sunshine and I don't know what it's going to be, 75 today, maybe 70, 75. So we'll take that, definitely. But I run our professional center. So as you might expect, the folks that we assist typically are folks watching the show, those that might be underemployed or maybe unemployed right now, all ages, all industries, all backgrounds. So we're free. And if you can figure out how to work the internets, you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn. We also do this show every week. We also bring in really exciting guests. We've got a really cool guest today, and I'm going to use the word dichotomy. That might be the longest word I'll use today, but with neuroscience, is that the same? Dichotomy, neuroscience. Yeah, they're the same, 4 syllables. But Dr. Melissa Hughes joins us all the way from, dare I say, Naples, Tampa? Naples, Florida. So by way of technology. So she's here, and I'm going to turn it to Melissa in just a second, but I do want to encourage you to let us know where you're watching from and put that in the chat box. And Teddy will monitor the chat box because you know what? He's good at that. He's going to do that. And if you have comments or questions for Melissa, please put those in the chat box. But our show today, and I'll have Melissa introduce herself here shortly. It's all about the brain today. And imposter syndrome, how stress and uncertainty weighs on the brain, and how all that stuff kind of works up here. And we'll learn a whole lot about a lot of stuff today. So sit tight, sit back and enjoy it. Melissa, why don't we turn it over to you and introduce yourself, and we'll get this thing started. But first,
Randy, Melissa, we got peeps from Wisconsin. We got peeps from Naples. We got peeps from Denver, Colorado. Randy, Thomasville, North Carolina, and Greensboro.
Middleton, Wisconsin. Look at that.
Yeah. Columbia, South Carolina. Dude, we're global, man.
And Lisa Cook is here. She is my neighbor down here in Naples. So good to see you, Lisa. Oh. Yes.
Good
okay.
Stuff. Welcome, everybody. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, carry on. Melissa, the floor is yours. What brings you here?
Well, a very, very smart woman, Susan Rooks. If you do not know the grammar goddess on LinkedIn, you must know her. She will make you smarter every time you engage with her. And she's the one that connected me with you guys. And I love to get geeky. I love to learn how the brain works and how to make it work better.
Wow. And so you are an author. What, 3 books? I think at least, right? 3? Yeah.
3. In my former life, I authored many educational resource materials, teacher resource materials, but my own work, I have Happy Hour with Einstein. And then I decided to do another book, Happier Hour with Einstein, another round, obviously. And then also I have a Happier Hour gratitude journal, full color 28-day gratitude journal.
Wow. And so you do that. Now you were a school teacher and you got started, but a couple quick things I wanted to bring out. You have a really unique website. It's melissahughes.rocks. Where did that come from?
Well, melissahughes.com was taken, and I wanted a cool website, and I started to look at some of the vanity domains, and that was there, and I was just like, hell yeah, I do rock. I want that. So
I hear you. And also you're an artist too. I mean, you drew that sketch that we've used to promote today's show. That's awesome. It's really cool.
And we're
there's a little story behind the sketch notes, I have to be honest. So sketch notes, actually, there's real science in sketch notes. It actually it opens the neural pathways in the brain. So when we can look at a visual representation of information rather than text or a linear representation, the way we typically take notes, that format of pictures and free-flowing images, number one, it opens our brain in a different way, and it actually enables us to make connections that we would not normally make. And number two, it helps us remember better. So as I learned how to do sketch notes, just because I thought it was a cool brainy thing, there's a great book out there called The Doodle Revolution, and it's written by Sonny Brown. And Sonny Brown actually did a TED Talk, and that's, I mean, it's old, 10 years old maybe, but that's where I discovered it. And it's got all of the kind of science behind it. But when I do my sketch notes, then it's a good way for me to remember content, but it's also a great way to, in one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, tell people what they're going to get from the hour presentation that I give or whatever. So
Very cool.
It's kind of been a cool thing. Yeah.
Very cool. And you've done TED Talks too, I think, haven't you? Or other talks?
I just did one.
Okay.
I just finished it. And take that, COVID. It was supposed to be last year and COVID derailed it, but we got it done. And so I think there will be a live virtual event. I don't know what that means exactly, but it will be a live virtual event in April. So stay tuned for the details on that.
Very cool. And make sure if you're watching and you have a comment or question for Melissa that you drop it in the chat box, and Teddy will keep an eye on that for us. So I always ask the why question. What is it that got you doing what you do? How'd that happen?
Well, I was a 4th grade teacher, and I was that teacher. I was that teacher. I was going to change the world one child at a time. And I was like, so passionate about being the best teacher that I could be. And at the end of my first year, actually that first year was the first year we had standardized testing, high stakes, standardized testing.
Sure.
Like high stakes to the point where kids were throwing up because they were so nervous. And we would spend 6 weeks doing test prep, and we would send all these notices home to parents, get a good night's sleep, eat a good breakfast. Like, this is, do your very best work. And we would create so much angst around this test. And then we said, now go in there and do your very best. And it would have been really nice for me to know that that's simply impossible to do your very best thinking when you're all stressed out. And so at the end of my first year, I sat down with my mentor and we did a post-mortem and what did I want to learn, how to do better. And my overarching question was, how in the world can I be the best teacher that I can possibly be if I don't understand how the brain learns? And so that was the very beginning of my journey into becoming a neuroscience geek. And fast forward to where I am today, what I learned over the years is that it's not just about being the best learner in the classroom. It's about being the best learner in the boardroom and in the conference room. And, whatever room you're in, because all things being equal, the way we learn is what separates the best from the rest.
Gotcha. Now, our show today is not just for job hunters. And of course, every week we try to tie in not only job hunting, but also where we can, professional development. So people on the job suffer from stress and uncertainty. So whether you're a job hunter or employed, or you're somebody like Teddy who is self-employed, Teddy's in the same boat every day. Essentially, he's unemployed. So there's a level of stress and uncertainty for all of us to varying degrees. So that's what we're going to talk about today and how that impacts your brain. We'll also hit on the imposter syndrome. What is it and how to deal with it? But first, now, Teddy, you know this. I was a liberal arts major, right? A liberal arts guy, a media major. So what I'm about to enter is, for the first time in my life, I'm about to take a course in Neuroscience 101. So ready? Let's go. What do we need to know about neuroscience, first of all? Give us a foundation.
All right. So Neuroscience 101, this is a crash course. The brain develops from bottom to top and back to front, right? So if you think of your fist as a brain, And it kind of looks like a brain, right? This is like this part behind your forehead.
Okay.
At the bottom, this is the survival brain. That develops first. In the very center is your limbic system or your emotional brain. That develops second. And then your thinking brain or the neocortex develops third. Following the order of development, our neural priorities are 1, to survive, 2, to feel, and 3, to think. So while we'd like to think that we're all rational and thoughtful and, you know, making sound decisions based upon all of the appropriate information, we're not. Our brain is focused on keeping us alive first, and then feeling and managing emotions second. So imagine if you visit the zoo and you see a lion, your instinctive emotional response is, yikes, danger, right?
Yep.
Your amygdala immediately sounds the alarm downstairs in the survival brain and says, high alert, be, sounds the alarm. And in doing so, it actually pauses the thinking brain for just a split second to allocate all of the neural resources down to the survival brain. Eventually, your thinking brain catches up and it assesses the situation and it realizes you're really not in danger. The amygdala overreacted. It turns off the alarm. Logic wins. But we don't default to logic. We default to emotion. So that's a little neuroscience 101. And I guess I should also say, as long as we're going to do the full crash course on neuroscience 101, the neurotransmitters that are happening, that are being released in your brain, we have the power to generate the neurotransmitters that actually make our brain work better. So the happy chemicals are dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. We get dopamine and endorphins from exercise. Dopamine is like a tricky one though, because dopamine is the addiction chemical. So, whatever that vice is that makes you feel, oh, I love that, I want more of that. Dopamine it's an overproduction of dopamine that's creating that. Serotonin is our all is good with the world. It's our, zen, and I'm content and everything's good. That's our serotonin. We get that from sunshine. And oxytocin is the cuddle drug. It's actually we call it the love hormone because we get it from sex, but we also get it from hugs and just platonic touches. The biggest surge of oxytocin comes when a mother breastfeeds her child. And that is because there are neurons and neural pathways in the brain that are specifically dedicated to bonding with other people. And oxytocin is the bonding molecule. So those are the three chemicals that actually make the prefrontal cortex, the part right behind your forehead, work better. It actually facilitates activity in the prefrontal cortex. Cortisol, dun dun dun, that's the bad one, right? That's the one that actually engages the survival brain. Now,
is that the fight or flight part?
Yes.
Is that where we're okay? Yeah.
But here's the thing about cortisol. Actually, cortisol, the right amount of cortisol is good for us because it keeps us alert. It's what keeps us from walking out into the middle of traffic, right? That's the survival brain that's always on. And the survival brain is always on because we're always generating just enough cortisol to keep us alert. The problem is if we are over anxious or we have chronic stress and we have an overproduction of cortisol, cortisol actually it weakens the brain cell walls. It actually pierces them and shrinks them, and eventually they die. So too much stress makes us dumb, period.
What about too much alcohol in college? That and other stuff. Teddy, you're muted.
Don't bring that up, Randy. Don't bring that up.
Was that inappropriate? But, you talk about, what I'll call activities that, more to the point, activities, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or stress, but self-induced things, I guess those things, does the brain begin to regenerate at all, or once they're gone, they're gone?
Oh no,
Asking for,
neuroplasticity. Yeah,
I'm asking for
for
a
a friend.
friend. Yeah, asking for a friend.
All the damage that
Yeah.
you created in college is
Last year.
not and last year, and maybe even over the weekend.
I was a late bloomer.
I'm not.
Yeah.
No judgment here. I'm just saying. But
Yeah.
we have neuroplasticity is an amazing thing, and so we can always create new. So dendrites. If you think of dendrites in the brain, they're the little branchy-like things. And if you think of your brain in terms of the Charlie Brown Christmas tree, which has
Okay.
just like a few branches, and every time you learn something, those branches grow and they connect to other neurons. And so when you get to be like Einsteinian, then you've got the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. So
that's Teddy's problem. He and Einstein are like this.
Yeah.
And so I've always admired that. But no, this is fascinating. You hear things about the brain but to actually sit down and have somebody explain it in layman's terms, and that's what I really like about what you do here, is that you explain it in ways that people can easily understand it, and you make it fun. So keep on chugging away. This is great. So
I got Peoples wants to talk.
All right.
Want to hear. So Lisa says, how does this social isolation of COVID impact our brain and learning? Melissa, can you speak to that, please?
So,
I see your head doing this. Oh my God, I know this is not going to be good.
So COVID has really impacted us negatively in a lot of ways. And the social isolation part might be the hardest part for the brain to actually recover from, because we are wired to connect with other people. We're wired to engage with other people. And even just something as simple as wearing a mask and not being able to see another person's smile. So here's another neuroscience 101, emotional contagion, that we actually can catch someone's emotions just within 60 seconds. If a boss walks into a conference room full of the teams in the conference room and they're all waiting for the meeting to start, and the boss just got out of a meeting with his boss and the board and whatever, and they're breathing down his neck and he's all anxious and frustrated and in a bad mood, and he comes in and he's all scowling, and it has nothing to do with his team. It has everything to do with the meeting he just left.
Yeah.
But he comes in less than 60 seconds, he can start to generate cortisol in his team members' brains. And then if the job is, let's do our best thinking and let's brainstorm and let's problem solve and he just kind of blew that. And it's not intentional, but until you know that, until you know that that's actually what's going on, it happens all the time. So here's my workplace tip of the day. If you have like any kind of brainstorming session or any kind of team meeting scheduled for today, the best way to start it is to make people laugh. Make people laugh. Tell them a corny joke. Anything, just make them laugh, because laughter does a lot of things. It does a lot of things in the brain. It generates all kinds of good chemicals. But the one really good thing that it does that makes a big difference in a team meeting is it bonds people. It makes people feel safe. It makes people feel like they have a sense of psychological safety, because we don't laugh with people we don't trust. We laugh with people we like and people we trust, and all of that just makes the brain work better.
Good stuff. Let me, Melissa, that's great. I love that. That's my quote of the day. My quote of the day. People laugh with people they trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. It's just a couple notes. Jeff Young wanted to know if you, as he's also a teacher, is triune, and I'm not going to pronounce it right, is triune brain, TRIUNE, is still a thing. I think you spoke to it. He said you spoke to it already.
Actually, there's a lot, and I won't get into this deeply, but Jeff, if you're really interested in this, the triune brain theory was developed by a guy named Paul MacLean back in the 60s. And it's actually there have been some neuroscience experts who have really poked holes in that theory, in terms of the triune brain theory is that the survival brain developed, and then it evolved into an emotional brain on top, and then it evolved. And so what we've come to know is that the brain actually doesn't it didn't evolve in that kind of layered thing, but we do know that the brain develops from survival brain to emotional brain to thinking brain. So the triune brain is still a thing, but people have actually poked holes in that theory.
Yeah. And I'm not going to question you on this, Melissa, but when you say that, our brain is survival, then feel, then think, does everybody get to the think phase, or does some of us not quite get there? Never mind. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. One of our topics today.
Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, one of our topics today deals with stress and uncertainty and how that impacts the brain. So folks that are in a job search or maybe on the job and just kind of stressing out a little bit about whatever, their job, their health, their anything. So let's break that down. How can we address some of these issues? How does it impact us? What can we do to kind of fix it, if anything? Help us out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the stress of uncertainty is a really big deal. That is because the brain likes familiarity. The brain likes to know what's going to happen next. We don't like surprises, even though the novelty is good for the brain, but the brain really doesn't like surprises. And if you think of uncertainty, I'll give you a couple of really great examples. Mm-hmm. Because the stress actually maxes out when we are at a 50-50 tipping point, whether it's a 50% chance of something good happening or not, or something bad happening. So imagine that you're driving down the road, you're headed to a meeting. The meeting starts at 2:00. You give yourself plenty of time. You leave at 1:00. You think you'll stop at Starbucks, pick up a Java on the way, and you are halfway there and you find yourself in the middle of a traffic jam. And you're not panicked yet because you gave yourself plenty of time. And so, okay, maybe you won't get your Java, but you're going to make your meeting on time. The closer it gets to that point at which you're going to be late, your stress continues to rise. Mm-hmm. Once it gets to that 50-50, I've got a 50-50 chance of making it, that is where your stress peaks. That's I just don't know what's going to happen, right? Once you pass that and you know for sure that you're not going to make it, the stress starts to go down again. So what does that mean for those of us who are leading people? That point at which there's a certain amount of tension, I'm going to call it creative tension. Peter Senge used to use that phrase, creative tension. There's a certain amount of creative tension that is good, that keeps you alert, that keeps you kind of in that engaged space. So if there's absolutely nothing to worry, nothing to think about, everything is completely certain, everything that's going to happen in your day, that's a pretty boring day. You're not going to be very engaged. So you need to have a little bit of variety, uncertainty, unpredictability, those kinds of things. But in times of stress and in times of chaos, the closer you get to that 50-50 point is when the stress peaks. So as a leader, what do? You keep them on the other side of that. You keep them back down from that. And part of that is you may not know the answer. You may not know how it's going to turn out, but people knowing that they're not alone in times of crisis makes that crisis easier. So somebody's question earlier about the isolation, that's part of the reason the isolation has been so terrible for people, because everybody kind of feels like they're doing this thing alone. And if you take the hospitality industry, I mean, they've been hit terribly hard with this. And the folks that are servers and bartenders, and they're down to 50% capacity, and maybe they're down to 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. All of that uncertainty is weighing on them. The one way to make that easier is to make sure that they know that they're not like all alone in the worry. Just worrying with someone makes that easier.
Does structure help? I'm a big structure guy. I know, Teddy, you would never guess that, but
I've seen your notepad, dude.
I love structure. And you used a word, maybe not today on our show, but I think you used a word in the show notes that you had sent us, what I'll call the word lazy, in that our mind likes to be calm and know kind of what's going on. So let's pivot for just a moment and focus on the job hunt person who's wondering, when is this going to end? I guess, and that's sort of the 50-50 is I'm chugging away, but I can't see the finish line. I don't know if it's over that hill or over the next hill or the next hill. So what role or emphasis can structure play so that we feel like we're accomplishing something to keep us on that good side? We know we're not alone. Others are in a job search, but it feels like it's just us because I'm stuck in these four walls all day. Talk about structure and creating order, I guess, if that help. Would that help any?
That's a great point. And I think you used the word accomplishment, and accomplishment is so important when we are uncertain. So setting small goals for yourself, even if it isn't related to the job search. So you should have goals for yourself related to this job search. I'm going to connect with 10 new people on LinkedIn this week. I'm going to, apply for 5 positions this week, whatever. But then you should also have personal goals that address your own mental and physical health. Because what we know is just a 20-minute walk actually increases the oxygen that goes to your brain and makes us think better, right? If you're lucky enough, like me, to live in the Sunshine State or live somewhere where the sun shines, that helps your thought process. That helps not just your mood, but also the way your brain functions. So setting these small goals for yourself, in addition to the work-related goals, set some personal goals that are actually going to make you feel better, address your mood, address your energy level. Because the other thing that we've learned from the pandemic is that I did nothing and I was exhausted by doing nothing. Like, the less you do, the less energy you have, right? So making space in your day for you and create a checklist, make it a goal, and give yourself like a smiley face or a star, or highlight it with a big bright yellow highlighter, whatever, however you want to identify that you did that thing. That gives your brain dopamine, and that makes your brain work better.
And I write a list and check them off, like Santa's list, and check it twice. Teddy, it's 1:30. Why don't you do your housekeeping? And we've got some people in the chat area. I think they'd like to get their questions addressed.
I like Rich's comment. He says, since uncertainty is so stressful, do something we have control over and make us feel better, as I paraphrase Rich's statement. Yeah, I like that. Hey, everybody,
exactly,
it's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. Randy, we got to start using time zone words, dude. Okay. I don't mean to stress you out, man, but people need to know where we are, So, hey, it's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm Teddy Burriss, my good friend Randy Wooden. You're either on with us live, or you're watching us on Facebook or LinkedIn, or watching it on YouTube. And our special guest today is Melissa Hughes. And Melissa is bringing us conversations about how we can work with our mind. How can we work with the survival mode of our mind, the feel good and the think part of our mind, so that we can achieve our goals. And in this context, we're wrapping it around job search. So Melissa, thank you very much for being here. Randy, back to you, buddy.
Well, Donald had asked a question about you'd mentioned addictions and why some people seem to be more comfortable with pessimism, worry, and sarcasm. And I got to tell you, people like that, I have very little use for them. And probably they feel the same way about me. My Clifton Strengths top strength is positivity. And so that's an oil and water kind of thing. But some people are like that, and they're not happy unless they're pissed off. And at what point do you just, how do you change that if you're kind of mired in the muck like that?
Well, that's a great question. And I will say there are two things at play here.
Yeah.
The first is that we are wired for negative thinking. It's an ancestral hand-me-down.
Okay.
So a few million years ago, our ancestors weren't basking in the beauty of the great outdoors. It was far more important for them to be on the lookout for saber-toothed tigers and poison berries, right? That is how they survived.
Yeah.
So we've actually kept that hypersensitivity to threat. And that is actually why our survival brain is always humming. It's always on, because that's how we live another day. That's what stops us from walking out into traffic. So we are wired for negativity, but then there's another thing at play, and that's called the vicious cycle and the virtuous cycle. And the brain actually likes patterns too. So if you're like a Randy sort of person, and you're optimistic, and the glass is always half full, you're going to be looking for all the good stuff. You're going to keep that pattern of good things, good thoughts, good fortune going in your head. If you're in a crappy mood, and so you get up in the morning and you're the glass half empty kind of guy, you're going to say, today is going to be like the worst day. It's raining. I'm tired. This is going to be a terrible day. You're going to spend a lot of your day looking for reasons why it's a terrible day. And part of that is confirmation bias. The brain looks for evidence to prove that which we believe to be true. So if you believe it's going to be a crappy day, you're going to find all kinds of reasons to be right about that.
Yeah.
If you believe that it's going to be a great day, you're going to find all kinds of reasons to be right about that. The big thing to note about the virtuous cycle and the vicious cycle is that you can't interrupt that chain of thinking just by happenstance. You have to intentionally interrupt that. So if you notice that you are in, and we've all been there, I mean, it happens to all of us, where you're in the vicious cycle, where just everything that could go wrong is going wrong. Why me? I hate this day. I want to go home. It's one of those kinds of days. You have to intentionally break that chain of negativity with something positive. And the best way to do that is gratitude. Gratitude is the best way to break that negative cycle. So rather than be, the pessimist sees the glass as half empty, the optimist sees the glass as half full, the happiest sees the glass and is thankful for the glass.
Yeah. I don't know about you, Randy, but when my glass gets less than half full, I immediately walk downstairs to the kegerator and fix it.
Somehow I knew that was coming. How can we talk about fix? You kind of talked a bit about how it's I guess a conscious pattern, or we have to consciously think about it. So let's walk back a little bit. I guess in our development, are we somewhat born a pessimist, if you will, versus optimist? Do we acquire those traits at an early age? How do we kind of get into what I'll call a rut, whether it's a positive, negative, or somewhere in the middle rut? How do we get there?
Well, the negative feelings, aside from just being wired for negative thoughts because that keeps us alive, the negative feelings actually come from a deficit. So you either don't feel safe, or you don't have basic needs met, right? Financial concerns, you don't have housing, you don't have enough food. But from a psychological standpoint, most of our negative thinking comes from psychological discomfort. I mean, I don't feel safe. I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like the person I'm working with, I trust this person. I don't feel like my status among my colleagues is safe. It's important to remember that the brain processes psychological pain the same way it processes physical pain. So, you wouldn't say to someone who fell down the steps and broke their ankle, you wouldn't say, shake it off, you've got another ankle, right? But we do that with people.
Now you tell me, man.
You're assuming, Melissa.
Hey, true story, Melissa. One of my coworkers just broke her ankle. Seriously, like over the weekend, and she's on the call today. She'll go unnamed. And I was this close to saying that. I think I called her Grace. I said, "Well, thank you. You sounds like you had a great weekend, Grace. But hey, rub a little dirt on it, and you got another one. So deal with it." But so I get.
But I hear you, Melissa. Good people wouldn't say that.
I'm working
Good
on. I'm
people
working.
wouldn't.
I'm working on it.
But I think sometimes
yeah.
we overlook the psychological trauma, the psychological pain that people feel when they feel like their ideas aren't heard. They feel like they're not accepted or included in the group at work, or whatever that situation happens to be. So
yeah.
So,
That'll get you. Teddy, you got
a couple points came up.
Yep.
Deanne says, absolutely try to focus on mental, physical, and spiritual goals. And I love what you said, Melissa. One of the most powerful ways to force yourself out of that thunk is gratitude. I often say, and give. Mm-hmm. Do something for someone else. Jeff throws out, I think you can convince, and he adds, dare I say, fool yourself into being positive by thinking about other people first. Is there another trick or two you have, Melissa, for forcing ourselves to get out of that thunk?
Yep. So one of the things that I implemented a couple years back, there was a study done where they asked random people to think of someone in their life that it didn't have to just be work related. It could be a colleague, or it could be a friend or family member. Think of someone that you really appreciate, that just really makes your life better. And if it's at work, maybe it makes your life easier at work, or maybe it makes your life more enjoyable at work. And if it's, personal, it doesn't matter. And then what they said was, I don't want you to just write a letter to that person. So each of the people wrote a letter. And then they took some of the people and said, now I want you to share that letter personally with that person. So pick up the phone and call them and tell them. And before the study, they did kind of a baseline. They took a baseline happiness status, right? How happy are you? And what they found was that the people who experienced more joy in sharing, the people who experienced the most joy in sharing their letter of appreciation to that person were the people who were unhappiest to begin with. What does that mean?
Delta, those greater.
That's right. That means on your worst day, the thing that you can do to make yourself feel better is tell someone else you appreciate them. So who was that? Jeff, my suggestion is keep a stack of thank you notes in your desk. And when you're feeling like blue and crappy and just not having a great day, thank someone for something think of someone and a reason to thank them. And I guarantee you will feel better than they will.
That's great. That's good stuff, Melissa. That's really good stuff. I like that idea. So, and Lisa reminded us, and that underemployment and unemployment can cause psychological pain. It's often unrecognized. And I wonder if that can then translate into physical pain.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Psychological discomfort, right? Or it actually has it manifests itself in severe ways in our physical and mental health. So one of the things that people don't always remember is that think about when you're really feeling depressed, when you're just down and you're, for whatever reason, it could be an employment issue, or it could be a relationship issue, but you just don't feel like doing anything. The times that we need to be with people the most are the times that we typically go, and I'm just going to curl up under the covers with, Ben and Jerry, and I'm going to just do this myself. We withdraw. And that's when we need to be around people the most. So, my suggestion is in terms of understand that all of these stressors and all of this psychological trauma takes a toll on our mental, emotional, and our physical health.
I think I'd like to pivot. We've got about 20 minutes left, at about quarter till, maybe 10 till, maybe about 10 till. We'll ask you to kind of summarize and what are some takeaways you'd like folks to have. But there's another topic that we want to talk about today, and that's called imposter syndrome. And I honestly, until you and I talked a couple months ago, I had not heard that specific phrase.
And then last night, Randy, I ran into a LinkedIn Live conversation about imposter syndrome.
So first off, what is imposter syndrome? And then we'll move on from there and how to address it and so forth. So what is when was this phrase coined, and what does it mean?
The phrase was coined back in 1979 by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And they were initially trying to determine why successful women often minimized their success or dismissed it as luck. Mm-hmm. Since then, we've identified different imposter profiles, but the one thing they all share is that it's most prevalent among driven, aspirational, high achievers, women and men, in all professions and social groups. Imposter syndrome is the kind that I have, and this was actually what my TED talk was on. So you have to tune in for that to get like the full scoop on imposter syndrome. But there are different imposter profiles, but Tom Hanks, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, Howard Schultz, Sheryl Sandberg, all of those folks, along with Albert Einstein, have this predisposition to minimize success as something we stumbled into rather than something we earned. So it's like you set a goal and you go after that goal and you get it. And then once you get it, you go, oh my gosh, like in any minute, somebody's going to figure out that this was a huge mistake, that I don't belong here. Like, so like they picked the wrong name. Like couldn't be me. I'm not smart enough for that. I'm not good enough for that. Even though you did all the work, you just don't give yourself, it's more, and it isn't a fear of failure or a crisis of confidence. It's more a dismissal of merit. It's more, I didn't earn this. I don't deserve this.
Is it in part the self-deprecation? So when somebody pays you a compliment on a job well done and you go, well, it's just nothing, or is that all kind of part of that mix?
Yeah, I think you feel that way, but I think it happens. It's really among high achievers. Practically by definition, if you have imposter feelings, then you're successful. And it's actually not being able to see yourself the same way you see everyone else. It's having a distorted perception of what I think I can do, what I can actually do, and what I think everyone else can do. Like that's all warped and it's not accurate. And I think it's so here's the thing. We all want the world to think that we're competent and intelligent and, acclaimed and accomplished. And so it's really hard to say to actually admit to someone, man, I just don't feel like I earned this thing, whatever this thing is. And yet, when you put it out into the universe, what you find is that there are some really accomplished people who have admitted feeling like frauds throughout their careers.
Yeah.
Sure. And, the emperor has no clothes or something like that, or you just, how did I get here? Wow.
Right.
If they only knew that, whatever. So that's interesting. Now, can you, percentage wise, 100 people out of 100 people, high achievers, how many have some form of this from studies that you've read?
North of 70%.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And is it equal male, female, or does that not much matter? Yeah.
It's across the board. It's college kids to, CEOs. And what we are also learning is that social media and ghosting are two cultural phenomena that actually contribute to the growing cases of imposter syndrome. Because if you think about social media, we see the filtered and photoshopped perfection of everyone out there compared with.
Look at Teddy. I mean, look, there's perfection personified right there,
Exactly, right? And we compare that to what we know about ourselves, which is wrinkles and warts and flaws and all of it, right? So that's the social media aspect. And then ghosting, there's a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect, and it explains why unfinished business in the brain consumes so much mental and emotional bandwidth. We hate it that we have something that is left unfinished. And when someone, from a neurological perspective, ghosting is a form of emotional cruelty. And when someone just vanishes from our life, it's the Zeigarnik effect is your imposter, your inner critic, filibustering a million reasons why you aren't even good enough to say goodbye to.
A lot of that going on. We hear that from job hunters a lot of times. We don't hear back from the employer. I invested how many hours in applying and maybe even interviewing, and now I don't even get I don't hear anything. And that not knowing part again goes back to that uncertainty as well of not knowing, am I in or am I out? When is this going to end? So I think a lot of this stuff is intertwined. I don't know, Teddy, if you've got any other thoughts. We've got another 4 or 5 minutes before
a couple thoughts. Doug asked, what's the effect of unemployment on the brain, since we learn in our field, but now we're having to learn all these other things that are not directly related. We're having to learn how to resume and interview and networking and LinkedIn, but we're not learning our field. Does this play out in the development of our brain if we're having to transition and then ultimately go back?
I think it all depends on whether you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Because if you have a growth mindset and you get jazzed about learning something new, and you look at every, so you got to take a step back and do a resume for the first time in 15 years, right? A lot of people are there. It's all in how you embrace that. If you think of it like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm doing a resume again. Or if you think of it like, oh, this is an opportunity to do a great resume and really, really capture where I've been for the last 15 years. It's all perspective.
There you go, Doug. Change your mindset on that, buddy. Hey, Perry says this and asks a question. Unemployment and COVID making us feel disconnected from everyone, everywhere in life. We're deliberately countered. So how do we, I think he's asking, how do we deliberately counter that so we can start returning ourselves to this positive, healthy brain attitude thing when we get ready to start a job? How do we start transitioning our minds out of this world we're in? What are your thoughts?
I would say 3 things. I would say gratitude, because that's if you take anything away from this hour, take gratitude, because it fixes so much. And also just personal goals, and whether that is, and I'm not saying you have to become a gym rat, but if you just say, I'm going to walk around the block every single day, it isn't just the walk that helps you. It's the saying, I'm going to do this thing, and then doing it that helps you. That feeling of accomplishment gives you more than you believe it ever could. And then, I just think this is an opportunity to learn more about yourself, learn what are those things that you think will help you when you get back to work, whatever that new workplace is. Now may be that time to read that leadership book, to read that, nonfiction book that you wanted to read and you never had time. Those are the kinds of things that you put on your to-do list now, because not only are you feeling like you are taking steps towards bettering yourself, you are bettering yourself, and it's taking those steps are as important as the steps.
Good chat. Thank you. So,
anything left, Teddy, before we move into?
Other than the fact that Dean threw out again that I should be a movie star, but we're going to ignore Dean for right now, and we'll talk about that later on. So,
I'll have I'll have my people get with your people, and we'll cover that. Hey, Melissa, back to you now. We would like you to kind of summarize. What are some takeaways? We've covered a lot of turf today. and my brain hurts. You've filled it with so much stuff. It just hurts right now. So help me feel good about this hour. What are some things that you can break it down and say, hey, go away with these things, and your brain will thank you for it.
Okay. So we talked a lot about gratitude. There's a
Yeah.
really easy way to bookend your day with gratitude and how it will help you. So in the morning, first thing, get up, have your coffee. Before you do email or news, come up with 3 things that you actually want to see in your day and be grateful for, right? And it doesn't have to be very specific. So you could say, one thing is, I want to be grateful for a really great LinkedIn conversation. I want to be grateful for finding an article that just really resonated with me today. Little things. And then at the end of the day, you look back, you reflect back on your day and you go, what are 3 things that I truly am grateful for? That does a couple things. It actually gets the good juices flowing up there. It is a way to lower your stress and anxiety, because anything, remember the Zeigarnik effect, unfinished business, brain hates it. And so if you're worrying about stuff that didn't get resolved through the day, you're going to take that to bed with you. Mm-hmm. And that actually impacts your quality of sleep. We didn't talk about sleep, but glial cells are the neural housekeepers that come through when you are in a deep sleep. And what happens is when we get into that deep sleep, the interstitial spaces in our brain expand, and it lets the glial cells come through, the neural housekeepers come through, like the night shift, cleaning up all the neurotoxins and dead cells that we killed with cortisol throughout the day.
You make that sound so wonderful.
And
I need a brain cleanse. Forget the liver.
Exactly
I need a brain cleanse.
It's exactly what it is. I mean, have you ever woken up in the morning and you feel like you have brain fog? It's likely because you didn't get a good night's sleep, and there's all this clutter.
I'll go with
that. Got to plug in the brain Roomba.
Exactly.
Very cool. Yeah. What else you got? Some other thoughts about? We mentioned the gratitude. What about the imposter syndrome and the how to overcome that? Just summarize that if you would. How can we address that?
Addressing imposter syndrome is, just remembering that we all have an inner critic, and the inner critic can be a real bully. And you thought I was going to say something else. The inner critic can be a real bully. And the best way to quiet the inner critic is to go, you know what? Albert Einstein thought he was an imposter, and Tom Hanks thought he was an imposter, and Sheryl Sandberg thought she was an imposter. And I worked hard for this. I set these goals and I did this, and reflect back on all of the things that you did intentionally. So we take intentional steps to reach our goals, and then we often forget to intentionally reflect on those steps we took. And that's just as important. And that's really the best way to kind of get out of the imposter syndrome. And really, when you reach a goal, when you do something, you own it. Own you're awesome.
I like that. Yeah. Good stuff.
I do too. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you very much. Hang around for a few minutes here. I can offer up a story. I'll make it up. I don't really have one ever, but I always come up with one. And then Teddy, I want you to, if you would share your thoughts, and then also talk about next week's special guest. And next week is St. Patrick's Day, isn't it? Or close to it.
Oh, we're going to do something wild that day.
It's something having to do with green.
Hey, do you want to hear our St. Patrick's Day joke?
Absolutely.
Okay. Why should you never iron a shamrock?
Why should we never iron a shamrock? I don't know. Why not?
Because you don't want to press your luck.
Oh.
See, and now we can go on with that brainstorming meeting.
See, now you got me laughing. See, yep. And I my story deals with a fellow named Rick that he was a sales trainer. It was a long time ago. And we sat through sales training, not just product knowledge, but how to sell. And he talked about verbal cushions. And I've mentioned this on the show, and I talked to my clients about it. And it's a conversational bridge to help allow you to drop defenses, buy you some time to think about what you're going to say, and let them let them know you're going to get to the answer. So somebody says, what's this going to cost me? You could say, Melissa, for you, I'll keep it under $1 million this time. But what it did was it elicited a smile, humor. And humor is a great way to help drop defenses.
Yes.
Instead of saying, well, that depends on, and now I've lost you, because now there's no humor involved. So where humor can be used, do it. Make sure they understand that it is humor, because otherwise they might think you're a jerk. But say it with a smile.
Yeah.
And I think that helps people to lower their defenses a little bit. And Rick also had talked about how people make buying decisions based on emotion, to your point, and they back it up with logic. This car is a great example. Hey, this is going to make me look 20 years younger. You know, leather smells great. That stereo is great, and all this stuff. That's why we buy it. But then we justify it by saying, well, you know, I got a lower interest rate, and so it's going to save me $22.50 a month. And so we do this all through our lives. We've got that emotional part. And I forget her last name, but it's Sarah Elkin, I think it was.
Sarah Elkin. Your stories don't define you, how you tell them to.
Bingo. Talking about stories. And so if you're in interviews, or politicians are great at this, about telling a story as opposed to just reciting a bunch of statistics, because we can relate to stories. And we laugh with people that we like and trust, or that we trust. So I think all this plays in together with, whether it's a job hunt and I'm in the interview process, or I'm dealing in my personal life or on the job, a little bit of humor. I think just a lot of what you said, we may intuitively know it, but we don't really think about it. And I think what I got from you today was to be aware of what's going on. And it gives you a sense, a little bit more of control of what's going on. So that power is knowledge, or knowledge is power, kind of thing. So Teddy, I'm going to throw it to you, and you take us home.
All right, I'm back. Hey, Melissa, thank you very much for showing up. Really do appreciate all our special guests, and you bring lots of ideas. Donald said he's working on 4 pages of notes. And I'm sure that there are notes from me. There are notes from you. Here's what I heard real quickly. I heard this: our mindset and how we let our mind work affects everything about our lives. It affects ourselves, our ability to achieve. It affects everyone around us. Or my notes are, it affects our energy level, our desire to do the things we need to do. And I think this is critical if you're in life, not just for, Teddy running his multi-billion-dollar business in his mind, or, people in job search as well. All of this affects no matter what we do in our lives. And I think we all need to pay attention to the way we think, and pay attention to the way we let our mind move, so that we can achieve our best goals. I love what you said, Melissa. I got another quote of the day is, bookend your day with gratitude. And I wrote down, I learned from you, morning gratitude and what I'm looking forward to in the day, midday gratitude about excitement of what I just accomplished and the conversations I just had, and the end of day reflection on the whole sum of the day. I look at the parts that were painful, and look at the parts that were not. And so that really good stuff. And Melissa, I appreciate you poking my mind and making me think about that. Hey, my last few moments here, let's let you know that April 7th is our anniversary show. It'll be an hour and a half that day. It'll be the only time, one time a year, we do an hour and a half show, because it's going to be so full of just rich conversations from all over the place. I guarantee you're going to love it. If you know anybody that has not experienced Lunch with Randy and Teddy, you got to tell them about it. Next week, which is the 17th, Janae Adams will join us. Janae is going to bring some common sense ideas about finances, common sense stuff that we all have the ability to do in some ways or another. And Janae's a good friend, and she's a really smart lady, and she will be another one of our absolutely fantastic special guests. And we look forward to her joining us. Melissa, thank you.
Thank you. Just last thought, pay attention to what you pay attention to.
Yes,
because
ma'am. Yeah.
That's where.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Talk
Thank
to
you all.
Melissa. You guys
See you
have a
later,
great
buddy.
week. Be safe. Take care.